Playgrounds. I've always been a pretty low-energy kid. I've been sick for most of my life with an unknown gastrointestinal disease. Nearly every night since I was born, I would throw up. That may sound scary, but it was just normal for me. Because of that, and more health issues that were unknown at the time, I was tired all the time. Some of my strongest memories from being around 7 to 9 years old were me being frustrated that I couldn't play tag with the other kids on the playground at 4-H. It's not that I wasn't allowed to, but I couldn't keep up. It was no fun, and I just wanted to lay in the grass and sleep. So I sat on the swings instead, watching the other kids from afar and making up stories in my head of being able to fly, being able to catch up to the other kids, and never get tired. Because we didn't know what it was, and I couldn't explain myself well, I'd have to re-explain why I wasn't playing with the other kids almost every time we went out to play. Most of the adults thought I was just being lazy, and because I didn't have any obvious physical problems, there was no way that I wasn't just trying to cause problems. I had been known to talk back to adults, not having instilled in me that grown-ups and teachers are to be feared from public school. I was simply just slacking off. I didn't know how to explain that I just couldn't gather the energy to move. Sewing class. I've been sewing competitively since I was 7 years old. For each year, from an apron at 7 to a full 18th century 6-piece outfit at 17, I would meet with a leader to form a plan for this competitions project and figure out what new skills I'd have to learn. I've had several project leaders over the years, and they each mean a lot to me in different ways. However, I unintentionally shared a significant moment with one of them, my first visible flare-up. I was 10 years old. It was a normal day, and I was heading out to go to my leader's house to sew for the day. It's hard to get down the stairs, I found myself thinking, and so I began stepping down more carefully and slowly, putting all my weight on one foot. I pretty quickly after put that out of my mind. My leader told me her sewing room chair and desk was pretty messy, so we sat cross-legged on the carpeted floor. I was a skinny kid, having not gone through puberty or any major weight fluctuations yet. I was wearing black stretchy leggings, as was my norm at the time. I hated how any other kind of pants felt. All was going well, and although I was fighting my normal sleepiness, again, constant low energy was, well, a constant, we were making good progress. Nearly halfway through the meeting, my leader started to get concerned. Mind you, we lived in a hick farm town where everyone's faces were stone cold. I rarely knew how she was feeling, but this time it was obvious. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah, I think so. Why?" I replied. "Your knee," she pointed. "It's all swollen." I looked down at my right knee, locked into place as my legs were entangled with each other on the floor. I couldn't tell the difference much, and I didn't really know what a body part that was swollen looked like. "Is it bad? I can't tell," I told her. "It looks pretty bad. Did you fall? Do you want some ice?" I didn't remember falling, but I did remember that it was hard to walk down the stairs earlier. I didn't tell her that, but I kept it in the back of my brain. She went to get me ice, and that's when it started to hurt. I couldn't really get out of the position I was sitting on the floor. My little stick knee had swelled up to the size of a grapefruit. We called my mom, and she brought me home. I felt so guilty. I didn't know what I had done to make this happen. Bed rest. When you hear the word arthritis, what do you think of? Probably your grandmother struggling to open a pill bottle in her old age. Something like that. At the age of 10, I didn't think anything of the word. I didn't know what it meant at all. So when we got the diagnosis from the doctor after a week of me being on bed rest, my mother was relieved. She knew what was going on. I, on the other hand, didn't know what arthritis was, and therefore thought my leg was going to be cut off. I've been homeschooled most of my life, so spending a week in bed wasn't a huge deal, as my mom would bring me my work and I could just do it in bed. It was difficult to keep from being restless, though. It was strange, going from typically wanting to just go to bed and rest all the time to being confined to my bed and unable to move, surrounded by pillows and propping my leg up covered in ice packs while we waited for a response from the doctor. It was a long week. Not so bad. I had never gone to a specialty doctor before, so when I went to Dr. Albert, I had no idea what to do or how to feel. Another thing I had no experience in the past with was getting shots. I hadn't been vaccinated before. We had complications in our family's past. A cousin died from side effects of a vaccine. So I really had no idea what to expect when the doctor announced that it would be best for me to have a cortisone shot in my knee. It was supposed to bring down the swelling. Looking back, I now realize that I promptly had my first panic attack when I found out the news. My parents were siding with this stranger who wanted to stick a giant piece of metal in my knee that already hurt me so much. I had to be held down for the shot. I kept squirming away and yelling, sobbing my heart out. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. On its own, I would have been fine. Afterwards, Dr. Albert smiled in a sickeningly sweet way at me, in what I can only assume was an attempted showing of affection. He said, "Well, that wasn't so bad, was it?" And he swats, like somewhere in between a slap and a pat, at my knee, the one that he just put the cortisone shot into. I was distraught about the whole experience, but I wouldn't actually know the disastrous results of that simple action until nearly a year later, and then for the rest of my life. The drain. The cortisone shot did seem to help, for about a week. I was able to move around more, and I certainly wasn't on bed rest anymore. Before I was fully up and about, though, Dr. Albert suggested I get the excess fluid in my knee drained. That scared me out of my mind, but I thought about what I had just gone through with the shot. At least it can't be as bad as the cortisone shot, I thought to myself. So I calmly agreed to go in for a consultation. Typically when we went to doctor appointments, my mom would be the one to drive me. She would stay with me the whole time, especially holding my hand if I were to get blood drawn or other scary or painful procedures. This time, however, my mom had to work and take care of my new baby sister at home, so my dad drove me. It was a fun car trip, and we talked and sang the whole way there. I was excited to spend the ride there with him because typically he's working downstairs and I'm doing schoolwork upstairs. Once we got to the office and were sitting in the small room that smelled like cleaning solution, I realized how much nicer it felt to have him take me to an appointment for a change. As much as my mom was a comfort to have there, it was much more relaxing to be joking and singing the whole time leading up to the appointment instead of talking through and arguing about the symptoms so I wouldn't forget, and then would forget anyway. The consultation went pretty well. I was nervous for when the procedure would happen, but I thought I'd have more time to psych myself up. When I come back, I told myself, I'll have to remember to bring a stuffed animal to hug. After the doctor left the room, I picked up my sweater and math book that I had brought with me and was about to hop off the seat. Then the door opened. A friendly-looking nurse walked in, pushing a cold metal tray on wheels. The tray had 2 needles and a couple vials on it. One huge and empty, and one tiny and full of clear liquid. I froze in my seat, overcome with the horrifying realization of what this meant, yet unable to speak up for myself. "Are you ready?" asked the nurse as the doctor walked in behind her. "I guess so," I replied. Again, I had no idea how to speak up for myself at the time. They never told me or my dad that they'd be doing the procedure that day. I scooched back on the seat and clutched my sweater and math book to my chest. The nurse and doctor prepared the numbing shot and injected it into my knee. That part scared me, but it wasn't super bad. Unfortunately, I thought that was the whole thing. Looking up from my math book that I had been reading to distract myself. Mind you, the math book was about 4 grade levels below where I was at, so there wasn't much to challenge my brain and efficiently distract myself with. I saw the doctor standing near the end of the seat. He was holding the biggest needle I had ever seen, attached to a gigantic barrel. My dad noticed that I had noticed, and started trying to tell me more jokes and silly stories. I felt the pressure of the needle going in, and everything else is a blackout blur. I didn't cry, I didn't pass out, but looking back, I believe that was one of my first major dissociative episodes. I don't remember anything until I got in the van and on the phone with my mom. It wasn't until then that I started crying. I was 10. Where do we go from here? So, how do we help her? My mom asked all the doctors, and none of us knew the answer. The cortisone shot hadn't helped, the knee draining had relieved a lot of the pressure and allowed me to walk a little easier, but at that point I was regularly using a wheelchair on anything longer than a half-mile walk. I didn't mind the wheelchair, but it was often inconvenient, and I still hated not having the energy to go run and play. On September 26th, 2012, the day before my 11th birthday, I was officially diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis. That type of arthritis is an autoimmune disease, so I had more on my plate because I was sick all the time. A cold that typically knocks a person down for the weekend would last me for 2 months. I was grateful when I had a stomach bug because at least those didn't come with coughing and sneezing that would last for months. I was constantly exhausted. Some of the doctors suggested putting me on diets to control my weight and sugar so I'd have less flare-ups. Those were all awful and really messed up my relationship with food in the long run. I had to go to physical therapy to learn how to move again, and I still limp on many days. We tried allergy testing to make sure nothing was making my symptoms worse. I got my eyeballs tapped on with a machine to make sure the arthritis wasn't messing up my eyes. Then I made it worse. It gets worse. On October 21st, 2015, I was playing with friends on the playground. My mom and my friend's mom were bonding over the fact that they were both foster adoptive parents. I wanted to make sure everything went perfectly so the state would see that we had positive connections to other foster parents and we'd be more likely to actually be able to adopt future kids. Adopting my little sister was a battle enough, and my anxiety was high around anyone associated with the system. At that particular playground, there's a little zip line. You hang on to the little triangle and zoom across a couple yards from one pole to another. If you fall, it's only a few feet and you eat wood chips. It's no big deal. Unless you majorly screw it up like I did. The poles are really solid metal. Really hard if you slam into it. Worthy of a bruise for most kids. You bump into it, you cry if you're a baby, then you get back up and keep playing. The issue. Remember that slap Dr. Albert had given me back at the cortisone shot? We were constantly watching my knee and noticed that the little red dot at the injection shot had grown into a red, blue, purple, and white splotch covering the top of my kneecap. The cortisone shot had leaked from the injection site where he had slapped my knee, making the cortisone eat away at my knee tissue and fat until there was nothing left but the skin. So when I slammed into the pole, I didn't cry. I did go over to the bench where the moms were sitting, though, and I just kind of sat there, dissociating again and holding my knee. They asked if I was okay, and I told them what happened. I was wearing those damn black leggings again. It shows you how much I don't grow. But the black managed to get blacker when I realized blood began seeping through this thin fabric. I insisted I was okay, that I wanted to keep playing and my mom to keep hanging out with her new friend. I didn't want this to be their introduction to us. But Mom insisted on taking me home until we figured out what to do. Upon arrival home, we discovered that my dad had customers in his shop downstairs. They also happened to be EMS workers. I kept trying to hide, and they very politely offered to look at the injury. Knowing how bad it was and that they'd take me back to the hospital, I did the only thing my brain could send me the message to do. Scream and crawl / limp / run up the stairs and into my room. Now, I didn't have a lock on my room or anything like that, so it was a bit pointless, but I was terrified of anyone touching my knee anymore. I kept running from my parents across the house, leaving a trail of blood as they tried to stop me. Eventually, I calmed down enough to let them take me to the ER. I did end up having to get stitches. I did worse at it than my little sister did when she broke open her eyebrow. She sat there and cried a tiny bit, but then brightened up when offered a popsicle. I squirmed and yelled and cried. I hated the stranger touching my knee, never mind stitching it up. But then it was done. until it wasn't done. A week later, the stitches got infected. I had to go back to the ER where my mom and I sat for 6 hours while I got a saline IV stabbed into my hand. I won't go into the gross details, but I will say that my knee had gained several more colors that weren't supposed to be there. I felt nauseous and scared, and of course, I was in pain. I don't remember much of that night, except for a couple flashes of moments where I forgot where I was, because it was just me and my mom watching dumb television while we waited for the infection to clear. It was a moment of being okay in a hospital. I hadn't had many of those. 3 years go by. Things died down for a while. I avoided doctors like the plague. My knee hurt, but that was just a constant of life at that point. I was technically on so many meds and vitamins, but they were overwhelming and made me feel sicker, so I didn't take them unless my mom made me. I was also supposed to move my kneecap around, half as physical therapy, half as trauma therapy. I didn't do that either. I grew a bone spur on my knee. If you look at it any time from 2015 to now, you can actually see the bone through my skin when I move my knee. I stopped wearing those stupid leggings, but I couldn't bring myself to wear shorts in public, so I started sweating in jeans all year long. A friend that I had unofficially adopted as my grandfather finally succumbed to his memory problems and made the mistake of attempting to show questioning police officers his gun collection, so the police shot him to death. I didn't find out until 3 months later, and I spiraled into my first depressive episode. Puberty was also hitting, making me realize that my entire body was wrong. I couldn't put a finger on why, though. I just knew that I hated myself and my body, and I just didn't want to exist anymore. Until 2019, I only went to the doctor for my 6-month checkups. I don't remember any of them. Let's fix this. In 2019, I decided to take things into my own hands. I was in pain all the time. I was sick all the time. I wanted to hurt my body because I hated it so bad. I kept dissociating to the point of losing weeks that I barely remember to this day. I decided that I would go to therapy on my own. I'd gone to therapy a few times before. They were all either heavily influenced by or controlled by my parents, who were going through their own issues and wanted therapy to help me as much as it had helped them. I hated it, and I didn't open up to the therapists at all. I was actually one of the main reasons that my first therapist stopped working with adolescents. With a few exceptions, their parents would make them go, and then they wouldn't talk and nothing would get done. So, I went back to my original therapist, and I'm so glad I did. She's so kind, and she understands me. We worked back through years of issues and determined I probably have dissociative identity disorder, considering my many symptoms. We've worked through enough that after 6 years, I was finally able to get off my antidepressants. I figured out that I had gender dysphoria. I identify with the male gender and am going on testosterone hormone therapy in a month from now to alleviate some of the symptoms. I will finally be able to appear more masculine, so my body will be a closer match to how my brain views myself. As for my physical problems, I've been working hard for the past few years. After nearly a decade, I pushed myself and walked over half a mile without my wheelchair. Then I kept going. My record was walking 5 miles, absolutely out of the question for 11-year-old me. I was able to run. I played a game of tag for the first time in 8 years. Sweden. Writing this essay was a challenge. After starting, though, I felt the need to finish for my own sanity. I've never sat down and just let it all out before. My brain did its job and convinced me that most of it wasn't real. Calvin, I can hear you asking, how are you going to finish the essay, and what does this section title mean? Have you been to Sweden? I'll get to it, don't worry, and no. For my childhood, I mostly wasn't allowed to play video games, and I definitely wasn't allowed to buy them. But now I'm 19, and I can waste my own money. So I bought what people have been talking about for years, Minecraft. I immediately got hyperfixated on it. The simplicity of it, making friends in the game, and most of all, the beautiful music. The block world was a refuge from reality. Hearing the soundtrack in the game would take me to a place where I wouldn't have to worry about anything. Physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain, all of it would go away. Sweden is one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack for the game. Sometimes I'll listen to it outside of Minecraft just to let my brain be at peace for a moment. I fell in love with gaming almost directly after I started streaming my games on Twitch. My friends and I are building a little community of gamers, streamers, and people who watch my streams. It's such a positive little place, and I'm so grateful to be able to make a difference and share my little internet refuge with others. Future. I want to keep going with streaming. If enough people watch my streams, I get to become a Twitch affiliate, then partner, and then I can earn money from Twitch. I want to do charity streams to donate money I raise to associations that research the ailments I've had to deal with throughout my entire life. No kid deserves to go through pain, but if they do, I want to be a part of helping their recovery. Whether that be through providing happy streams to take their mind off treatment, or donating to charities that fund research for those treatments. A big issue with the main illnesses I've had, arthritis, DID, dysphoria, and many more, is that they are invisible. It's easy to see when someone has a skin issue, when they are permanently in a wheelchair, when their hair is gone. But when someone's skin looks normal but constantly hurts, when they're sometimes in a wheelchair but sometimes aren't, when their hair is there but their brain feels shattered. It's horribly scary to talk about. Even scarier when the people that are supposed to take care of you, workers in the medical field, don't actually take care of you. So you have to do it yourself. I'm so incredibly grateful and relieved to have the opportunity to have a current healthcare team that I actually trust. I hope to help other people be able to find that relief someday.